Returning to developments in Parliament today, leader of the Opposition Pritam Singh crossed swords with Prime Minister Loong, accusing the ruling party of engaging in half-truths in communications to the public. But PM Lee laid out the details, stressing that too much was being inferred from very little. Tan Si-hui reports.
The Ridout Road saga that involved two ministers renting state-owned bungalows, as well as Mr. S. Iswaran's corruption probe. Both these cases involve the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, and there are examples raised by leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, when he called the government slow in clearing the air on potentially embarrassing issues.
Instead, they reveal a pattern of behavior over a period of time of the PAP engaging in half-truths on matters of significant public interest. And this behavior goes a long way to explain why there is real disquiet among Singaporeans today when the PAP invokes the memory of pioneer generation PAP leaders and talks about trust.
But PM Lee says what's important is that the government conducted an investigation and addressed the issues at hand.
So I think in terms of transmission of information, we are pursuing a red herring. We could equally well ask, for example, when did the leader of opposition know about problems in his party and what did he do about them? But those are matters which the Workers' Party will have to decide and will have to account to Singaporeans. And the PAP, we establish our own standards and we establish our own practices.
Responding to MP Saktiandi Supaat's question about whether there needs to be a different set of rules regarding the transmission of information when a minister is involved, PM Lee provided further clarification.
Guidelines on disclosures involving ministers, basically we have to judge the situation. In this case, CPIB judged, and I supported them, that they are going to be interviewing a minister. They're going to be interviewing other people. Word will go around town. It's untenable for us to say we have no comment. And therefore, they put out a statement that they are interviewing the ministers, a minister. There have been, and it is not the previous precedent. Those of you who are old enough to remember, I don't think there's anybody else in the House except me who was here when Mr. Teh Cheang Wan was investigated. And none of that was announced. Because you don't know at first when you interview him whether or not there is something there. And if you interview him, if you announce that he's being interviewed, Minister for National Development, and then it turns out there's nothing there, and you come out 3 days later and say Minister for National Development is innocent, I think you're going to cause great consternation, and in the end of that, his reputation will be damaged undeservedly. But you investigate him first. If it turns out there is something there, at some point you cross a threshold and it is necessary to make an announcement. In this case, CPIB judged that the threshold to say that they are talking to Mr. Iswaran was there right from the beginning, because they were going to call in other people, including Mr. Ong Beng Sing, HPL. Therefore, it was not possible for this thing to be kept quiet, and it had to be stated up front. But would they know where the investigation will lead? At that point, no. 3 days later, after interviewing different people and establishing various facts, they make a fresh assessment. At that point, they are comfortable to say that the minister was arrested and bailed. Because the situation is different. So these are operational judgments which our law enforcement agencies have got to make. All the law enforcement agencies, whether it's CNB, whether it's the police, whether it's CPIB, and they do this all the time. And in this case, CPIB did it. And did they know that 3 days later, Mr. Ong Beng Sing would issue, HPL would issue such a statement? I think they expected that that HPL would have to issue such a statement because there's a regulatory requirement by the SGX. I don't think they would know what Mr. Ong Beng Sing would say, and it would depend what had transpired during the 3 days before Mr. Ong put out that statement. So I think we are reading a lot into very little.
MPs also raised questions about CPIB's processes, such as its investigation methods, as well as what's considered a formal investigation.
What is the difference between an investigation and a formal investigation by CPIB, and when is this threshold crossed?
In a quiet investigation, the CPIB doesn't exercise all of its powers. For example, it doesn't arrest people and formally interview them. It makes inquiries, it asks for information, but it has not formally exercised its powers. And to arrest a person and to compel him to answer their questions under the Prevention of Corruption Act. Because under the Prevention of Corruption Act, if you answer the CPIB and give the CPIB a false answer, that's a crime. It's like being on oath. So when you go into a formal investigation, that a transition point is passed.
What oversight is actually exercised over the CPIB, and whether the CPIB's investigation methods are being audited on a regular basis to ensure impartiality and parity of treatments, regardless of the identity of the subject of the investigations.
The most significant test of whether our investigations are up to mark is really this, that when CPIB or any of our law enforcement agencies submit their case to the AGCs and it goes to the courts, are our investigations method up to the mark? Because if they are not up to the mark, they will be rejected by AGC and the courts. So the final arbiter, if you like, of the quality of the work that our law enforcement agencies do is actually with our courts.
Well, PM Lee adds that the elected president holds the second key to order investigations to proceed. And he also says having more layers of checks and balances is not the solution.
I'm wondering if the PMO has considered potentially extending this institutional reporting line beyond just essentially one branch of government, which is the executive branch.
So the solution is not to be found in more and more layers of checks and balances. The solution is to be found in honest people with integrity and conviction and courage to make the system work.
MPs also sought clarifications on other issues, including why Mr. Iswaran is receiving $8,500 per month when he is no longer undertaking any duties.
For $8,500 a month, that might be small change to some, but many Singaporeans have to work very hard for much less than that.
It's my judgment to make. Here I have to be fair to the minister involved, as well as do the right thing by the government and the taxpayer. He's under investigation. It is not a minor matter. He has not been convicted. He has not even been charged. Is it fair for me to say your pay goes to zero? I think it is not. What is fair? Well, I looked at the civil service. Civil service says half pay subject to minimum and ceiling. Their ceiling is about here too. So I decided on this number, $8,500.